Gilg Jew, Gilg J as Gilg Nerach.
Sure that Claare Gael is bewailiam us altige. My name is Robert Cutting Carswell, Robert Carslach.
Have you ever had tell of old Bobby Bob?
And I'd like to welcome you to this bilingual programme, Claare Gael. Claire Hingachi, because you'll hear part of it in the English language, as Ernod the Ginu Clash and Perchi Sigilg, and because you'll hear part of it in the Manx Gaelic, Chinyanamera, the mother tongue of Alun Fanning, the Isle of Man. As Mabanach Dutrish, as William Gell focuses on Castle Rushen, he's mentioned an incident of 1722, when a prisoner locked up there was none other than the Bishop of Sodern man, Thomas Wilson, and with him were his two vicars general, Matthias Curfey and William Walker. Lurgte dunje terten liebeg albanach moer on sustje Claare, henke macht den Prince for obvious van jis. As Laure is yn is there, the inch desen, maar so rennen dunje liege ser rish. Tred im rei shenrish ven jesje, tish cor ersen go back, as buishel son ridanach. The singer Sue White is from Lostwithiel in Cornwall, but here she sings about the bell ringers in Eglos Hale, which is about 13 miles northwest of Lostwithiel. Tawes geestiach rish Radio Vanning, Stasiwn en Asiwn, Viscol Skeliamach by Dúlish, Alun Vanning.
Come all you jolly ringers, come listen to my tale. I'll tell you of 5 ringers folk who lived in Eglos Hale. For ring the ray they bore this way wherever they did go. The music of the merry bells was their delight to show. It was Cardiff the good winder, he ring a treble bell. John Ellery was the second man and few could him excel. The third was Mullet the carpenter, the fourth was Thomas Clee, and Goodfellow the tenor man that rang them all so brave. Was the treble man, he stepped long with his toe, and casting off his eyes around, commanded them when to go. They pulled away with courage bold, which did their hearts revive. Sweet music then was quickly heard, with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They went out to Lanivery and brought away the prize, and then they went to Sanctuary and done the same likewise. Lanivery met St. Maiden, met St. Juliet, St. Hugh, but those 5 lads of Eglos Hale did all the rest outdo. This little corps they played so sure, no changes did they fear. No man did ever miss his threat, was joy to see and hear. And people all for miles around it tell over hill and dale the fame of those 5 ringers folk who lived in Eglos Hale. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding a ding a dong ding.
Cornish singer and guitarist Sue White, and harmonies were provided there by Rachel Daniel, and they were singing about the Eglos Hale Ringers. Bishop Thomas Wilson had concerns for church discipline, and this widely meant how people conducted themselves in their daily life, behaving contrary to the church's concept of a Christian life. And if they went against that, that was the subject of presentment to the ecclesiastical court. Now, strangely, fines imposed by the ecclesiastical court went to the Lord of Man. Bishop Thomas Wilson irritated the Lord of Man from his habit if he felt that people were truly repentant or were undertaking other appropriate forms of penance for their spiritual salvation, he would remit the monetary fine, so the Lord of Man lost out. However, far worse than that, though, Thomas Wilson had also been involved in the terms of the Act of Settlement of 1704, an act for the perfect settling and confirmation of the estates, tenures, fines, rents, suits, and services of the tenants of the Right Honourable James Earl of Derby within this Isle of Man. James Stanley, the 10th Earl of Derby, felt he'd been done down by the act, and he blamed largely Bishop Thomas Wilson for it. Tan dynne gol bacchus yn Liebeg, yn chyd nôd y fel y ben hiesio bwysiol son bwen weg, ons yn y jay chan weg wach bren, chawn y mara toc gytreisien. Te golgus y bŵr ach tan nostio glas ys bwych ys chynelu ro clir yn chyr sio. Ach, ni eisiant ad gedden bwen weg elen. Lwg treg iert yn ben hiesio giri castiol mwr clai, as die cor yn dynne gol bacchus yn ys rys, is yn chyr sio, tan ustja djur gorm as gorm dorcha as lia as tju. Ach, ti gedden y castiol mwr clai. Eist ti lalve rina tjira. Cyrdeliad yn dynne bach ol shiskas y fwr, gen y fel I creld y fel sien yn ryd cart y ynw. Liorish yn tre siot yn ustja lia dorcha, as te rai fod y stiach erish y tir. Ni ai sient yn yist ynw rigi. Ach bonus chilirach, ti giri dy fe na imper. A chyr siot yn bŵr dŵ dy lŵr as tiw as ta kesh getlach as a ria sheja. Seamus Begley sang with the band Cheda, and he sings here about the island of Dunanoir, which is itself off the island of Claare, Cape Clear Island off the south coast of Ireland. So Seamus Begley and Cheda.
Is my winter august fen no more capen tan shtain turshach locked not fevron o gusum balu tale hash Kids long khudar na kanhe kegur father Agus win to the narin mogroye da do Hangach saris kalin agadal semyoy her mal Lechelen savor Morhin på viljen med dans Het hev heilen bor Mal langon nor. Hos järn kjerisus ser rigan gras. Sen livel honin slå fleisch gehar. Med hod sjalericht mar a rosen fador. Good in maltan ake lehel
Doon and Or is the name of a castle built by the O'Driscolls on a small island which is itself off Cape Clare Island. Cape Clare Island lies about 8 miles, 13 kilometres, off the coast of Cork. And singing about Elion Run and Or was Seamus Begley with the band Cheddar. Ach tan je beg ginsten dinje de golde valje is de valley na imper hanna. Jorish nicht en dinje smuljen na wel beggar marn son a ben cheshege de wishel. Ach die ginste, de valley giri ve na fab. Nishesh ma ben cheshe. Dorten dinje, krenach vod een braach jay son riddenach en jid shen. Sult de lure. Te braach jay son beg en rauwer, as come shen, han noddach e junaway. Bach, net dote ben cheshe. Ma dod e imper, Jim, for the jinu peb, Jim. Imi rood as braie. Shemer imper mish, as chanellos ach ma gunje cheshe. Maar so sein dut gol. Maar so haie. As ve genacht an aglit as de moer. As renny bibberny as ve krai. As van a glunen egge a krauw. As ren gie voer troggel soes, as jetchel na bajel en sha, as henke de we fiedorge, as van voer gatte gehoord de slegen, as van a bed en couch begeert. On the appointment of Alexander Horne as governor in 1713, he particularly opposed the church with regard to jurisdiction over the military personnel of the Lord of Man. He didn't think that the ecclesiastical court should hold any sway over them. And then Mary Hendricks was accused in 1716, basically of prostitution, on her husband's licensed premises in Douglas, and she was excommunicated for adultery and condemned to penance and to prison. Well, she appealed, and Governor Alexander Horne directed that appeal to James Stanley, the 10th Earl of Derby, the Lord of Man. However, Bishop Wilson maintained that in a case before the ecclesiastical court, any appeal should go to the metropolitan, in other words, the archbishop of the section of the church in which the diocese was placed, and the diocese of Sodor and Man was placed under the Archbishop of York as the metropolitan. As the Lord of Man had no jurisdiction, Bishop Thomas Wilson refused to appear at the hearing, and for his non-appearance he was fined £10. However, apparently not wishing to inflame the situation at that time, James Stanley, the 10th Earl of Derby, remitted the fine. The harp of musician and singer Kerry Gael Owen Jones, who was living in Ceredigion and who's a Welsh speaker, but he speaks Welsh actually with a Canadian accent.
Manx Radio.
Stasiwn yn asiwn dy radio banning. As Carnish, Claare na Gael was sculler skelia mach, as Mish the Chebbeli, Robert Curtin Carswell, Robert a Carslach.
Did the other hear tell of old Bobby Bob?
Rishacht and looked de Claare na Gael guller skelia mach, der recordes rechlash and Jill or a skulgussen and dagger radio vanning, as Raya Kraman eish rish, as the master olje na Claare Nelly and Shen. As the podcast gologino J. Claare na Gael yes, vis vergeten nasty egen en edege radio vanning, na vine reagiere de podcast ed, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Audible, Spotify, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, na Alexa. There were other signs of an uneasy relation between church and state. In 1720 and 1721, the Episcopal Registrar John Woods of Kirkmaloo was twice imprisoned by the civil authority for refusing to do something for them without the bishop's say-so. I mentioned that the governor from 1713, Alexander Wood, had taken a stance opposing the ecclesiastical authority that Bishop Wilson sought to impose on the Stanley family and his followers. And this came to a head when, in 1721, Alexander Horne's wife, Jane, was herself the subject of a resentment to the ecclesiastical court for making slanderous statements. Well, the ecclesiastical court seems to have mitigated a requirement to do penance. Now, penance was quite a serious thing. This is how A.W. Moore describes doing penance in his The Folklore of the Isle of Man. It consisted in standing in a sheet at the parish church, or several parish churches, on Sunday during service, or at the market cross on Saturdays during market time. The number of days penance was regulated by the seriousness of the offence. We'll come back to that anon. Van spare gorm ons peurt se vein. Ach ek na tjauchen vei dorge as jurg, maar te ons dorren moer. As vei gennachten jag riach, as vei na jade won shen, as krauw, as doorte. O, gunje, ma vis dunje tau, na liebeg albenacht na mare brau. Emmes te wen, as borach ish, beskiri shen, na wel mo wish. Wel krij nish door den east. Och, nee, door den dunje, ti giri wein a peb. Soel tailiat tina peb hanna door den east. Maar so haie de valia, as hure maag de rauwe roos kiel hoer, les ples nolje begierte mooi. Bij ersen gulle redege master channel de lai, as treir en e cast na stiach angie, hure de rauwe bal jint solis les tauzenen as tauzenen de heilschigen. As van wen hiesje ege komrit ons garmet era, as wie na sai stoilri oil vireerd, as we triaden era ori, as ulius a moerles smoesagerdach. Now, the Scottish trio, sometimes quartet, Cantrip, got together as a result of playing together in sessions in Edinburgh. And here, though, they sing a song written by Jez Lowe. Jez is from Easington Colliery in County Durham. It's a song called Tom Tom.
A voice came down from a high-rise mountain, old and clear and strong, and its words we knew were grey with wisdom wrapped in an ancient song. Words as young as the northern hills and as old as the morning sun, as clear as a bell with a velvet mouth, and these are the words it rang. Bow down to the idle electric, cower in terror at the tick box. Now you'll know what only the gods know, but you'll never do better than the tom-tom. No, you'll never do better than the drum. like a lover, 'cause it made no sense and it tapped my feet in time. But the more it rang and the more I understood with every line. Bow down to the idle electric, cower in terror at the tick box. Now you'll know what only the gods know, but you'll never do better than the tom-tom. No, you'll never do better than the drum. An angry woman cried, what can it mean? And afraid that the man hit his head. But somebody smiled and danced to the tune and joined in every word. Bow down to the idle electric, cower in terror at the tick box. Now you'll know what only the gods know, but you'll never do better than the tom-tom. No, you'll never do better than the drum. And the old and the young tuned in, but all the while there were those who sang to the beat of an ancient skin. Bow down to the idle electric, cower in terror at the tick box. Now you'll know what only the gods know, but you'll never do better than the tom-tom. No, you'll never do better than the drum. Bow down to the idle electric, cower in terror at the tick box. Now you'll know what only the gods know, but you'll never do better than the tom-tom. No, you'll never do better than the drum. No, you'll never do better than the tom-tom. No, you'll never do better than the drum.
Scottish band Cantrip. Cantrip means a trick or a spell by a witch, and Cantrip were performing a song by Jez Lowe in praise of acoustic over electric, basically, and it was about the tom-tom. You'll never do better than the tom-tom. You'll never do better than the drum. As dag tjau Jane van Cheshege van in shadow, 3 rogen de heilschigen J de Hulje Woods. Jit vai woods a tour surge, gus a chynel shoe slew. As va oljoen, na imperen, as riegen, glune rooi, as pege cassack. Wel, me ven jesje door de dunje, as we na hai, as we blege ori, maar so nish towers de feb. Te, as ish, nish tammy me feb. As renny frailrish blege ori, derbe gennacht an de rawi na galach, maar de beg in de hai fo saish in de grenie. As lurk tamelt beg doorte, well, nishesh me ven jesje, kreeg is maar de wee, nish towers de feb. Renne ven jesje as sai soes fi staak as fi girach, as gedoort die weg. As doorte rish, wel, me ven jesje tammy tre stel de wel een boeiach verjere de welus de feb. Genadu chit de bij weg elje. Nimmers verder maag me gewoon shen door de ven jesje. A.W. Moore's description of penance continues. According to an entry in the Episcopal Records dated 1623, a malicious slanderer was, quote, to remain a liar of record and do open penance, putting his finger on his mouth and confessing a lie in saying, "Tongue, thou lied," and so publicly to ask the party offended forgiveness, unquote. And by the 34th, says A.W. Moore, and again he quotes, all offenders censured to penance are to perform their censures and satisfy the law before they be admitted to the Holy Communion. In the case of Jane Horn, the wife of the governor, she wasn't required to perform penance in this very public way, but she was ordered to ask forgiveness. Until such time as that was done, she was excommunicated, which meant she was cut off from the church and not allowed to take communion. However, the archdeacon of Man at that time was Robert Horrobin, and he was also the chaplain to the Governor Alexander Horne. So no doubt Alexander Horne exerted pressure on him to ignore the bishop and the ecclesiastical court. A song in Breton now from Nolwen Corbel, which, well, I'll say it now, it's a bit more accessible than the accompaniment may initially suggest. Nolwen Corbel from Quimper in Brittany, and a song in Breton called Etouin. Not quite sure what it's about. It possibly means I went, but oin seems to mean a lamb, so I'm totally confused about what it was about. Now, whatever pressure Governor Alexander Horne may have applied, his chaplain Robert Horrobin admitted the governor's wife Jane for communion, and this was in 1722. As he'd clearly gone against Bishop Wilson and the ecclesiastical court in doing so, Robert Horrobin was suspended from his duties, and James Stanley thereupon demanded that Bishop Wilson rescind Horrobin's suspension. But the bishop wouldn't do so, so James Stanley fined the bishop a huge sum, £60, and the two vicars general, Matthias Curfey and William Walker, were fined £20 apiece for defying his ruling, and in default they were to be imprisoned in Castle Rushen. Well, it was almost impossible for them to come up with that kind of sum anyway, and the churchmen were adamant that they'd acted correctly and refused to be cowed, and so they were subsequently imprisoned in Castle Rushen. Bishop Wilson appealed to the Crown about the imprisonment by James Stanley the 10th Earl of Derby and himself and the 2 vicars general, and they were released after 9 weeks. Sen hain yn ysdiaw dy lai. Ach fesh, chawd as vir yw vai ve bwyach, as fesh, chawd as vir yw vai ve bwyach, as chydodi cadla y fe fi smulioner na fi giri fe syna ennig. Ach ren yn dynnu siesha cadla chyd chon as trein ons doros kilach, lug yn le tarwch ega. Ach renne ben hiesje rolle as cadder vain derech jaug as a chow elia foot na hi, as ish smulnian olju en trei, sen odyssey chit de wees an na ennig. Ach a jinnach eier bi chitji. As trei honneki a madder an jurg, renny snau mach as a ljavi, as hai shies roshen unjeg dagen iri na grenia. As chaus renne green iri door te, te emmes. Kreid er ouwe green as een ees de eri, rare ma aignia. Maar when je shesje, dilly, as high an ullion ex stiach ons naast na genege, gin doeste, as emigus an easted, as instead of al mi giri poor herische green as een eest. Van dunje kadlige troom, treren die moeste, hutje vai een ljabi. Music by the band Trip that got together in Glasgow with members from Scotland, Ireland, England and the Isle of Man, and one of the composers of the music they played there was band member Isla Collister.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
As Crave seo stasiwn yn asiwn o radio fanning, seo dat Claare na Gael, mer yn pyn Robert Gooding Carswell, Robert y Carslach.
Haven't heard tell of our Bobby Bob.
Eis, renne creu hyn, draw dau ers yn hyn. Ys dosle y hwylyn ys dwrte. Mae'n hiesio creu dwrtw. Mae'n rynnu hiesio dwrtish. Mae'n y fodym gedyn y pŵr, da chor y grin ys neist iri tret am I giriad, chabi fe elias arach. Imi gys yn east ys instead fel shen morte. My ven hiesio dwrt y dynja, ys hwtje gys y rech liwn roi, chan nod yn east ons rech y gynw shen dan. Tam I goi rish da dod ei gynw imper ys peb gyd, biach bwyach le shen tam I gwiord. As Henky de vei kai leis mi horrens, as renny skriech mach, nod few no soldier, imi as lau. As mar so higher rosh, chamai as dode as huishalega. As Jerry dorren atchemach, as sgon dode tanachten na jado na kadanega. As van na taien, as na bilgen ernen jegel leis geer. As van na slegen krauw. As hutch na cregan stiach sa voer. Unfortunately, the dampness of whichever room it was he was housed in Castle Rushen, and it's not known, despite what signs you may see and people affecting to know which room it is, it's not known where he was held in Castle Rushen. The dampness of the place affected Bishop Wilson's right hand so badly that he was never able again to hold a pen, although he lived on for another 33 years after this time. This was by no means the end of the friction between church and state, but it's Bishop Wilson's imprisonment in Castle Rushen in 1722 that William Gell writes about. Here, zealous to defend the right, deprived of liberty and light, the saintly Wilson won the fight, though might or right would ride roughshod. Meekly he kissed the chastening rod, and left the issue with his God. Something positive that came of the imprisonment of Thomas Wilson with Matthias Curfey and William Walker is that there was work on a translation into Manx of religious texts. According to a footnote in A.W. Moore's Manx Worthies in relation to William Walker, he says, "The four Gospels, the Acts, and part of the Prayer Book are said to have been translated by them at this time." Now, this is a recording from 1964 of a well-known song from Cornwall, The Nightingale, and is performed here by Mel and Miles, and they're recorded at the Count House Folk Club in Botalach in Cornwall.
My sweetheart, come along, don't you hear the sweet song, the sweet notes of the nightingale flow? Don't you hear the fond tale of the sweet nightingale as she sings in the valley below? As she sings in the valley below. Pretty Betty, don't fail, for I'll carry your pail straight home to your cot as we go. You shall hear the fond tale of the sweet nightingale as she sings in the valley below. As she sings in the valley below. Pray let me alone, I have hands of my own. Along with you, sir, I'll not go. For to hear the fond tale of the sweet nightingale as she sings in the valley below. As she sings in the valley below. Pray sit yourself down with me on the ground, on the bank where the primroses grow. You shall hear the fond tale of the sweet nightingale as she sings in the valley below. As she sings in the valley below. couple agreed, and were married with speed, and soon to the church they did go. Now no more is she afraid, for to walk in the shade, nor to sit in the valley below, nor to sit in the valley below.
Mel and Miles recorded singing in the Count House, which was part of the mine workings in Botallack in Cornwall, not very far from Land's End, in fact, and they sang there through the summer months, with Miles playing the guitar there to accompany them, and the well-known Cornish song, The Nightingale. Ascending now the winding stair, we view a spectacle most rare, the enduring limestone everywhere. No creek portentous of decay in fragile pine, when pine's away the fragile fabric of today. Perhaps William Gell had some particular instance in mind here where modern building materials made of pine had been found wanting. I looked in the papers, I didn't spot anything, but I'm not sure what he had in mind there. But he's constant in his praise of the enduring limestone of Castle Rushen. Above, below, hewn limestone blocks, unyielding as granitic rocks, built to withstand 1,000 shocks. Here note we in the southern tower, minion of time's resistless power, the famous clock proclaims the hour, gift to Britannia's Virgin Queen. And there's a footnote here just to tell us that Britannia's Virgin Queen was Queen Elizabeth. In 1906, of course, the only Queen Elizabeth. The face of the famously one-fingered clock is square but set with one of its points upwards, and it has the words Eliz Reg 1597, Elizabeth Regina 1597. Van spare doe de bollach, as we tarnach boeruche, as we tendrelen on, as ren na tonnen, as kesherne weerok, reich o de slegen. Maar zo, dillie maag, gin bij able de glaasjen de vogelen egge heen. O, gunje, me wisten je touw, na ljebeg albanach, na mare brouw, emmers de wen as burg is, beskiri shen de wel me wish. Wel, kreenisch, doet een ljebeg albanach. Och, nee, doet een dunje, die giri korsergen den grien as den eest. Zoel tailjat doet een ljebeg albanach, Nieuw feathernies a chan weg wach vren shen ec chow na mare. As tat nin sai un shen gus a lai ton jew. As shen and skiel mechon and easter as a ven chesha. Ta na skiel sa chaglum show mechon a talier dunnel. Morris sauri de rauw wat talier beg na haige boerdegge fagus na nunjig, as we gavrige de crioi les uljuwen yard. Now, a couple of years ago, Irish band Dervish were at Druniach with vocalist Cathy Jordan. Cathy gave herself a project of a song for each Irish county. She herself is from County Roscommon, and this is the song she chose for County Roscommon.
Loved her, who was there to blame us? For wasn't she the pride of Petrivore? But her beauty made us all so shine. Not a man among us could look her in the eye. Eyes, oh eyes, sure that's the reason why we're in mourning for the pride of Petrivore. Eileen, oh, we had to go and grey ever since the day you wandered far away. Eileen, oh, there's good fishing to say, but there's none of them like the pride of Petrivore. Friday at the fair in Ballintubber, Eileen met McGrath, the cattle jubber. I'd like to set me mark upon the rubber, for he stole away the pride of Petrivore. He never seemed to see the girl at all, even when she ogled him from underneath the shawl. Looking big and masterful as she was looking small, most provoking for the pride of Petrivore. Eileen, oh, me heart has gone grey ever since the day you wandered far away. Eileen, oh, there's good fishing to say, but there's none of them like the pride of Petrivore. fate is hard to grapple. Of me eyes, Eileen was the apple, and now to see her walking up the chapel with the hardest featured man in Petrovore. And now, boys, that's all I have to say. When you do your courting, make no display. If you want them to run off the other, look the other way, 'cause they're mostly like the pride of Petrovore. Oh, Eileen, oh, me heart has gone grey ever since the day you wandered far away. Eileen, oh, there's good fish in the sea, but there's none of them like the pride of Petrovore. Oh, Eileen, oh, me heart has gone grey ever since the day you wandered far away. Eileen, oh, there's good fish in the sea, but there's none of them like the pride of Petrovore. None of them like the pride of Petrovore.
From Cathy Jordan's Cranky Island Song Project, she sang Eileen Og, which she chose to represent County Roscommon. Now, Petrovore is in County Cavan, and the lyric also mentions Ballintubber, which is in County Mayo. But the song is the work of well-known songwriter Percy French, who was born in Tulsk, County Roscommon. Gouds vi gavrich und shen henk shan ben schies en tred, as vi gemach mach, glai veirig rek, glai veirig lek. Geginnel van eemrig glaasjen ons kleesjen talier, de duggie jon mach as een unje gus dille mach. On show me ben vai, tar de saw me visu giri customer. Now, Elizabeth was Queen of England from 1558 to 1603, but apparently the clock didn't have a face at all until about 1720, and the face we see today showing the date 1597 is a modern copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, and so down the years. And it'll be time to look at that famous one-fingered clock again next time here in Claare, Gael. Ten treer dit de jarenish de chorkion Claare, Gael. Chris Pearson will be with you to bring 2 hours of the best chill-out music for your Sunday evening from 7 to 9, and then at 9 it's sundown to ease you through into Monday morning. Ach sienne bain Claare Shaw, Claare Gael comes to a close with a Welsh tune, Marwnad yr Hedydd, the elegy for the mountain lark. And the elegy for a mountain lark is in fact an elegy for the last real Prince of Wales, Owain Glyndŵr. And this is a version of the song by Welsh band Grimm, which means yeast. As Mersaw, until the next time, this is Robert Getting Carswell, Robert Carslag.
Old Bobby Bob.
Wishing you a very good night. If I'm a chriorts, as duts, me yeri and share.